And just make that breath, that movement, become the central feature of your awareness. And notice if just by this shift of attention, without any effort, your breath is becoming slower, deeper, calmer. And if the mind noise tries to push its way back into your consciousness, simply acknowledge it when you become aware of it, and then without resistance or without indulgence, just shift your awareness back to the feeling of the breath coming in and out. And as you feel this breath coming in and moving out, and what a delicious feeling it is, isn't it? See if you can put your attention onto the spot in the center of your chest over your heart. Feel its volume, its presence, its spaciousness. Feel that spot becoming lighter, more open, more expansive, feeling it from the inside. And now imagine that as you breathe in, you're breathing in directly through that spot in the center of your chest. And as you breathe out, you're breathing out through that spot in the center of your chest. So it's as though you're breathing in and breathing out directly through your heart. Noticing again if just with this shift of attention, that little area over your heart begins to feel more open, more expansive, lighter. And continuing to breathe in and breathe out. Now see if you can expand your awareness from that little spot, that sense of presence, feeling it expand from that spot over your heart and around your heart to all the other parts of your body, including more and more of your body in this feeling of presence, this feeling of expansion, so that you can feel that sense of presence moving up towards your neck and head, and up to your shoulders and down your arms to your hands, around from the front of your chest, around your ribs, to your back and spine, down towards your abdomen, hips, buttocks, and then down your legs to your feet. Can you feel your entire body as one seamless, unified field of energy, integrating all the parts, continuing to breathe? Now perhaps the feeling of the breath has itself expanded, so that the breath is coming in and going out through your entire body. And now notice all of the phenomena occurring around you in your immediate experience, looking at the objects in your field of vision and seeing them not through the filter of thoughts or concepts, but seeing them in their isness, in their suchness, without label, without judgment, and hearing the sounds that may be occurring around you, and hearing them without label or judgment, just pure sound, and feeling the sensations on your skin, your sense of touch, the feeling of the clothing on your body, seat underneath you, floor underneath your feet, the air, warm or cool, moist or dry, any movement of the air that may be occurring, and any aromas or flavors that might be lingering, engaging all your senses as pure sense, without label, without judgment, and asking yourself, where is the boundary? Where does what you're looking at end and your seeing of it begin? Where does the sound you're hearing end and your hearing of it begin? Where does the feeling on your skin end and your feeling of it begin? Where is the boundary? Is there a boundary? Or is that boundary created artificially by our thoughts? See if you can allow whatever boundary that may be there to dissolve, so that inside, outside, the breath, the sensations, your inner energy all become one. And now keeping some of your attention on the breath, on your inner body, expanding your awareness so that you're aware of all the other things occurring around you, as well as the sound of my voice and our discussion and the computer screen in front of you. Let's launch into our discussion today. Time is a construct too. Yes, it is, Kristalina. Time is a function of the ego. In presence, when you allow the ego to dissolve, there is no time. Yes, and it's a tool, just like the ego and just like thoughts. See, how many spiritual teachers in the past have said, we want to kill the ego? And yet, the first of the 5 precepts in Buddhism is, don't kill. So why would we want to kill the ego? We don't want to kill it because it's just a tool. It's a tool that we've developed to deal with what we believe our external reality to be. And sometimes it can be a very efficient tool, an effective tool, but sometimes when we adopt a defensive posture with the ego. And by defensive posture, I mean create more of a feeling of separation or immerse ourselves in negative emotional reactions to the things that are occurring around us. Then it becomes that proverbial double-edged sword that cuts us as much as it cuts whoever we feel is attacking us or threatening us. So we don't want to kill the ego or kill anything. We simply want to put it in its rightful place and remember that it's simply a tool. And just like Kristalina said before, time is one of those tools that the ego uses to help us order things, make sense of things, but it can also be used against us. So somebody once said, some spiritual teacher, and I don't remember who it was, but said that enlightenment is when the passage of time is with you rather than against you. That's a very true statement, I believe, because when you become present, which is all that enlightenment is, enlightenment is simply being in the state that we just cultivated or allowed ourselves to enter with our ABC exercise just a little while ago. And when we do that, when we focus away from the thoughts, which are the separative, defensive mechanisms of the ego, and we focus instead on what's going on right here and right now, the experiences, the phenomena occurring in our immediate experience without label, without judgment, without concept, and our breath and our inner body, feeling it as a unitary field of energy. That's it. We're here. Timelessness. It's always now. So our job is not to kill the ego, but simply to transcend the ego, which means that we take a higher perspective, including the ego in our expanded perspective, but not immersing ourselves in it anymore, and not allowing it to dictate our state of consciousness, our emotional reactions, but rather to put it back into the toolbox and then use it when needed. But understanding we are the carpenter. The ego is just the tool. It's not the boss. So transcending this ego is a sometimes tricky business because the ego does not want to be transcended, as anyone here can verify based on your own practice, your own struggles, your own doubts or confusion that have been occurring on whatever spiritual path you've been taking. The ego is a slippery customer, and we all know what the prime function of the ego is. What's the prime directive? Remember the prime directive in Star Trek, the non-interference policy? Well, what's the prime directive of the ego? Anyone? That is the prime belief of the ego. That is the foundation, separation. So yes, that is true. But what's the prime directive of the ego? Right, always interfere. The prime directive is control. Control, control, control. The ego needs to be in control. Right, maintaining the world. Tashi, that's very good. Anybody here read the Carlos Castaneda books, The Teachings of Don Juan? What was the state of mind or the description that Don Juan used when he was trying to get Castaneda to get out of his normal ego-controlled waking consciousness? Maintaining the world is what you said. That's what the ego does. So how do we stop the ego from maintaining? Well, I just gave it away. It's stopping the world. Remember Don Juan saying that our purpose is to stop the world. Right. And to enter. Now, Kristalina just put that phrase up there, the nahual. What is the nahual? It's the opposite of what? The tonal, right. So what is the tonal? The tonal is our ego mind. It's everything, according to Don Juan, it's everything that we know and everything that we don't know. And then there's this other state called the nahual. Right, Tashi, it's what we would consider the world. And the nahual is everything that we don't know. It's everything that's outside of the world. Okay, so the nahual is everything we don't know. It's what's outside of the ego, our normal waking consciousness, our normal awareness, our normal world. I like to say, I've said this many times in various Dharma talks, we live in an imperfect world, but a perfect universe, and that we inhabit both simultaneously. And all we need to do to stop the imperfect world and enter the perfect universe is in each moment to transcend the ego by shifting attention away from the thought-dominated consciousness that we use to interact with the world, to interact with what's going on around us. It's kind of like, well, you've heard the phrase that a lot of personal growth trainers or business consultants, etc., have been throwing around. To think outside the box. You've heard that one? Think outside the box. Well, thinking outside the box is not the answer, because the problem is that thinking is the box. So you don't want to think outside the box. You want to get out of the box that is thinking. Get out of that trap. Get out of that sense of separateness and that need for control that is the ego's prime directive. And a lot of us use different means of doing that, but all of these means that we use, or most of the means that we use, keep us inside the box because they're thought-based, they're conceptually based. And that's what defines the difference between conversion and transformation. Anybody know what the difference between conversion and transformation or is? Well, conversion, Tashi says conversion is staying the same. It's not staying the same, but in a way it is. Right. Conversion is moving to another thought or another belief system, but it's still staying at that level of thought. So you can be a Christian and be involved in Christian beliefs and use Christian techniques. So you can have one set of beliefs, and then you read something or you hear someone and you say, oh, that makes more sense. Maybe I'll become Buddhist because I like those teachings better than Christian teachings. Just as an example, I'm not trying to criticize any religion here, but if you are a Christian and become a Buddhist, that's a conversion. But if you're a Buddhist and you have a certain set of beliefs, or if you're a Christian and you have a certain set of beliefs, and then through meditation you understand how to get out of the box that we're talking about and expand your consciousness beyond the ego to that state that we call awakening or enlightenment. That's the transformation. And you don't transform by destroying the set of beliefs that you have. You don't have to destroy anything. All you have to do is, in a sense, climb a little higher on the mountain so that what you were looking at before, you now look at from a higher perspective and you can see more and more. It's kind of like, yes, move to a different level, a higher, more expansive, more inclusive level, where the older level is still there, but it has been transcended and yet included in this larger perspective. And we move through these states of consciousness. Right, Richard, not taking anything away, you only expand it. Yeah, the butterfly, Kat says, as in a butterfly. Right, who would ever think that's a transformation? I'm sure even the caterpillar crawling around has absolutely no idea that when it follows its instincts ultimately and spins its chrysalis and then lies dormant for however long, that it's going to emerge as a butterfly. So, and thank you, Meme. That analogy is very apt for us humans too, because for most of us, present company somewhat accepted, EXCEPTED, accepted, who do have this sense that this transformational process and this transformed state does exist and is simply dormant within us. Most humans go around like those caterpillars. Not only are they not aware of what is latent within them, but I'm sure that most of them actively resist. They would laugh at you if you told them, if you could talk to a caterpillar. Like, remember the old Dr. Dolittle movies? If I could talk to the animals, just imagine it chatting with a chimp and chimpanzee. So if you could talk to the caterpillars in caterpillarese and say, hey, I know you think you're a caterpillar now, but show them a picture of a butterfly. This is who you really are. They would look at you like you were crazy. And I'm sure in the same way that the people who the Buddha spoke with when he was alive and Jesus spoke with when he was alive, and he was telling them, look within, the kingdom of heaven is within you, or look within, thou art the Buddha, okay? And they would look at him and say, what are you, nuts? So it's a tough sell. So we who have engaged ourselves and committed ourselves to a spiritual path are the lucky ones. We're the ones who have opened our consciousness enough to admit to the possibility that we are truly more than just this bag of skin and bones that appears to be a separate entity in a world of millions of other separate entities and objects. Okay, Richard, people are scared of the full aspect of life and what can be reached. They are held back by their own hand. Absolutely true. But you know why they're held back? Why would somebody hold him or herself back from the most miraculous transformation that is possible? Why do they do it? Right. People don't like changes, and it's the ego that doesn't like changes because the ego has developed, has set itself up to be the boss, to be in control. And its greatest fear, the greatest fear of the ego, is not that it's going to go out of existence, because there's lots of egos. All we have to do is read the papers. Lots of egos who, when they feel that there's nothing left, they'll jump off a bridge, or they'll hang themselves, or they'll shoot themselves, or take an overdose of drugs. The ego is more afraid of losing control, because if the ego loses control, and yes, Kristalina, that is self-imprisonment. That is basically self-imprisonment. We hold ourselves in the prison, but we also have the key, and that key is allowing, is helping the ego to feel comfortable enough to let go of the control that it's exercising that keeps us in this illusion of separation and this state of craving and attachment to the idea that only things from the outside of us, or what we believe is the outside, are going to make us happy. Okay, Richard says, we truly never have control, but we make it seem like we do. Exactly. See, the ego always wants to convince you that it's right, because it does not want to let go of the control. Because to an ego, letting go of control means that there's nothing left. And if there's nothing left, it's not worth living. That's despair. So our job, the purpose of all spiritual practice, is not to attain enlightenment, because, as the Buddha said, we're already enlightened. We're already Buddhas. We're already Christs. Purpose of spiritual practice is simply to comfort, to encourage, to coax and cajole through whatever means, to give up the control that it doesn't want to give up, so that we drop those illusory boundaries that keep us in this feeling of separation, and we realize who and what we truly are. That's it. That's what meditation is about. That's what prayer is about. That's what any ascetic practice is about. It's simply to get the ego to relax and to say, okay. It's the difference. We were talking in the last Dharma Talk about the difference between resignation and surrender. You know, if the ego is still in control and something happens that you can't abide by and that the ego cannot control somehow, the emotional reaction to that event is resignation, despair. It's all over. But if you can get the ego to relax so that instead of resignation and despair, it instead surrenders its need for control, that is the gateway to transformation. Because once you surrender, once the ego says, there's nothing left for me to do, well, hallelujah, you've been screwing up things from the beginning. And out of that seeming emptiness, once you get out of that box, and yes, Richard, that's true, minds that are so boxed in, it's hard for them. And that's why we need to use as many skillful means, upaya, and set an example for people to try and make it palatable or comfortable for them. It is hard. It's hard for all of us, but it's especially hard for some people who are really boxed in. And those so-called personal growth gurus who go around spouting that idea, think outside the box, are simply talking about conversion. We're talking about transformation here, getting out of the box. And we need to get ourselves out of the box, and then in alignment with the bodhisattva ideal and that sense of compassion that becomes fully expansive as we are transformed, we want to share that transformation with as many people as we can. The first of the 4 great bodhisattva vows, sentient beings are numberless, I vow to save them all, because they're us and we're them. You know, when the Buddha attained enlightenment, he didn't have to start teaching. He had it made. He woke up. He was probably the first human being on the face of the planet to become fully awake. And he realized, he moved to that higher perspective, and he saw how his mind was working before he woke up, and understood how everyone else's mind worked, and realized that everyone could look at things from the same perspective that he had just attained, or he had just adopted. But like we mentioned before, like Richard said, those minds are boxed in and closed off. How do you convince them? How do you convince the caterpillar that it's truly a butterfly? Yes, Kristalline, experiential. Zeno says when the conditions are right. Yeah, we're all at different levels of readiness. And that readiness is more a readiness to let go of the defense mechanisms of the ego that stand in the way of our self-realization. Because the ego is a mechanism, it's a psychic mechanism that we ourselves have built. So we have to be aware that it's something that we ourselves have to deconstruct, and then we have to have the courage to go beyond the resistances of what we constructed ourselves. So it's like we've created this monster. Now granted, we created it for the right reasons at the time. We created it because we were confronted with painful or uncomfortable circumstances. But once those painful and uncomfortable circumstances were gone, we kept it. It had become firmly established, took on a life of its own, and now we're telling it we want it to go away. Well, I think it's going to have some different ideas. So again, that's why we need to work diligently and intelligently to help it to feel comfortable enough to gradually let go of control. The control that it has is inversely proportional to the expansiveness of who we are. So, Lucy says, student is ready, the teacher will come. The teacher is always there, though. Yes, the teacher, the ultimate teacher is your own true nature, which is always there, shining within you. So, the more you can get the resistances out of the way, the more you'll be able to follow the teacher. So, Richard says the first step is the willingness to accept and expand. Exactly. The Course in Miracles, anybody or everybody here familiar with the Course in Miracles, which is I suppose you could call it a Christian-oriented transformational practice or a transformational curriculum. But anyway, the Course in Miracles talks again and again about what it says as that little willingness, that all you have to do is make that little opening, is to just question the ego's need for control and your own inner teacher, which is everyone's true nature, the universal oneness, will be able to shine through and guide you more and more towards your own transformation. So yes, the first step is that willingness. It's like in Aikido, those of you who are aware that I teach the Japanese martial art of Aikido, and every so often I'll ask my students, what is the most important belt that you can wear in Aikido or any martial art? Anybody want to venture a guess? It's the white belt to me, because it means you've taken that first step. You've opened up your willingness to learn. If you don't put on that white belt, you'll never get anywhere. So, in the same way, on the spiritual path, the most important step that you can take is to open up your willingness, your acceptance of at least the idea that this experience that you're having now is not all that you are capable of. In the Zen tradition, they say that there are 3 things that you need to be a committed Zen practitioner: great faith, great doubt, and great courage. Great faith means that willingness, opening up to the idea and accepting the idea that transformation is possible. Great doubt means not accepting anything on the level of ideas, not believing anything that anybody tells you, not accepting anything that you haven't experienced for yourself as being the true transformation. And great courage means persisting even in the face of the resistance of your own ego to its own dissolution. Okay, Meme says, hearing you, I get the impression that the ego is like a spoiled child that we must learn to control and banish. Am I reading this right? You're reading the first half right, but not the second, okay? The ego is essentially a spoiled child, a psychic spoiled child that you're holding on to in your consciousness, and that treats everything, perceives everything, responds to everything through that filter of being a spoiled child. But the idea is not that we want to try and control it. Like, we don't want to punish it, we don't want to restrain it, when we don't want to banish it. What we want to do is embrace it and say, everything's okay, you can relax, I got you covered, so that both of you can go hand in hand up to the next level. Yes, Zeno, love it. That's basically it. Why do little children throw tantrums? Because basically the ego is like a little child that's throwing a tantrum. Why do little children throw tantrums? Did that answer the question, Meme? Okay, and yes, Crystalina, yes, attention. Because they want attention. They want the attention that they were wrongfully deprived of. And for that, we'd have to go into my other whole talk that I did, I guess, last month on the continuum concept, which is the basic reason why we all feel this sense of separation and we all have this need for attention that our parents meet or don't meet in some way that then gives rise to the development of the ego and all the defense mechanisms. But yes, the ego is like a kid throwing a tantrum, and the way to help that kid to heal, because that's what we want. We want the ego to heal. We don't want it to be killed. We don't want it to be hurt. We don't want it to be banished. We want it to heal. And so we have to love it and give it the attention, but not allow it to continue to direct our moods or behaviors. And that's where mindfulness and meditation come in. It's being able to maintain your sense of connectedness even in the face of the tantrums that the ego is throwing, and to let it do what it's going to do and hold it in your loving attention so that it understands that you're there. You're not trying to push it away. You understand what it needs, and you're going to give it what it's been crying for 20, 30, 40 years, however old you are. Does that make sense? Okay, good. Well, I guess my job is done here. I'll be riding off into the sunset. Yep, just like the Lone Ranger. Hi-yo Silver, away. And thank you all. Richard, you made my day. I'm not the only one thinking this way. Yeah, well, that's what they say about people who get into psychotherapy, that one of the good things about psychotherapy is that they learn that they're not the only ones that are crazy. But I'm speaking as both a psychotherapist and a psychotherapy patient.